Hello, and welcome to another gameplay analysis video. Today we'll be looking at my fourth game from the International Championship, which is my second four-player game. This time I'm in first position, right at 1811. In second position is Fjantarik, who we saw in one previous video and took third place in a three-player game. It's rated 1752. Martin Fischer is in third position, rated 1892, who we saw in two recent videos, taking third place in a four-player game and taking third place in a three-player game. Totsilence is in fourth position, rated 1806. I have not faced him in this tournament yet, but he has taken 1/3 in one three-player game. Now moving on to the game as usual. In terms of overall strategy, what stands out to me this time is that I think that there is very strong support in labs. Gates, Jobs, Marie, and Meyer are all lab-based leaders, and there's Manhattan and Spaceflight, which really help support that. Additionally, there's also support from H2 from those leaders in Nobel and Darwin, so you can get some Nobel Prizes or just grab a lot of text more easily. Another strong synergy in this game is the colonization one. There is Red Cross and fast food chains if you can get extra yellow tokens for colonies. And there is the starter Sun Suit available with Colossus as a good wonder for that. Additionally, from going on to age 1, there's Columbus and Isabella as colonization leaders and a little bit Eleanor. And in age 2, there's Maria and Cook and Suez. So pretty much all the colonization pieces are in place if you want to go down that route. In terms of theater and library-based strategies, there isn't really much to be said about libraries in general here. There's a little bit of Darwin use, but there's no Einstein, there's no Fleming. But there is Bach that can go into Chaplin or Marlene. There's just no Hollywood, so no big culture payoff wonder. There is Empire State to be said, and that could go well with Bill Gates, or perhaps a strong colonization strategy with Suez, or maybe oil plus Marie. Since there's no railroad or Watt combination though, Marie plus oil is not very well supported overall. She's just more like a supplemental leader if you just happen to have it. And then also to note, there is Gandhi in the game as well if you get a big culture lead with Bach or something. But the problem is that there's plenty of military actions in the game with Catherine, Napoleon, and Kremlin as well. Okay, moving on to age A. You can see here that I picked Stonehenge as my first pickup. There's a thought to take a leader here, but I just didn't want to leave a leader and wonder for the next person in line, Fjantarik. So I just take Stonehenge here. I think it's a perfectly good wonder, and I just don't want to get too fancy here. So Fjantarik takes Boudica and Frugality. I think this is the most solid choice. Sun Tzu is a possibility, but maybe you would not be able to get Colossus in that way. But it does leave this combination here, and since the colonization strategy is so strong, Martin takes Colossus plus Sun Tzu here. It's powerful, but it is high variance. It's just if you're willing to take that kind of playstyle. And then Totsilence takes Aristotle and Engineering Genius. While I initially thought that Totsilence would just go for Roman roads here, taking the solid wonder plus leader pickup, I've come around to taking Engineering Genius again. I think I've devalued it for so long because I value the early civil action so much. But the reality is I just don't think that any age A wonder is really that much better than another. So if you're able to get Engineering Genius and maybe pick up a wonder a little bit faster, or sorry, finish a wonder a little bit faster, you can get a pretty good benefit from that. Okay, moving on. Here, I don't have many options for leaders. There's Homer and Moses available for one. I could wait for Alexander. I don't really want to take the civil action loss and wait for Alexander for maybe when I need to grab something more important. So I just take Homer here. And I know that some people believe that the excessive happy face from Homer plus Stonehenge might be a little much, but I think it's totally fine. And I think one of the great ways of taking advantage of Homer is if you put your population somewhere besides a happiness solution. Additionally, that Homer has a military resource bonus that is a little bit underrated. Even though it doesn't fit into your economy, you're still pretty much guaranteed to build 3 or 4 military units through age 1, so it is a little bit of resources saved. Anyways, Fjantarik takes Roman roads. I think completely expected with it available now. Um, builds a mine and just, yeah, the standard stuff. Martin also does standard actions, takes rich land. And Totsilence, he has Hanging Gardens available on 1, Acropolis available on 2, but decides to skip either of them, takes Urban Growth, and is possibly eyeing this Silk Road that just dropped down on his turn. You don't need to take Acropolis if your plan is to go for it. It's very likely to stay on the board for 1 civil action next turn, just because that Fjantarik and I are very, very unlikely to take cultural heritage. Here, I do a play that I've seen a lot of other people do recently, which is to take iron on 3 right away. This is a big cost because I have a 4-step wonder, so this leaves me in some civil action debt. But there really aren't very many interesting to do. If I want to be civil action efficient, I'd do something like build 2 steps of Stonehenge, increase population, take urban growth, something like that. But those are not necessary actions either. The fact that I go earlier into corruption also dissuades me from doing something like that. So I just have to be aware that I'm in civil action debt taking this iron so early, but the fact that it is so early can really pay off to just build up my economy more easily. I built a lab here, and I don't have my free worker, but I think that's okay. Fjantarik builds 2 stages of urban roads, keeps himself out of corruption, keeps the free worker, pretty standard, and takes the knights, especially with Martin being Sun Tzu. Martin seeds, Totsilence religion, so I am again a little bit punished for not having a free worker, but I have 2 happy faces anyways. I don't really think that's gonna bother me too much. Does standard stuff, and then takes cartography here. So he's leaning into that colonization strategy, which I think can be very powerful in this game. Totsilence takes Code of Laws, takes Monarchy, skips out on a wonder again, and I don't think I agree with that. I think that even though you're using the Aristotle bonus here, I think that it's really, really easy to get too many resources, and not having the wonder in play really can get you in some trouble. It's really hard to spend resources very early. There's a reason why so many people preach on getting getting a wonder from age A, and if not, it has to be an early wonder from age 1. And the biggest problem with something like Silk Road is that it doesn't really get you out of corruption very easily because it has so many steps, and all the steps are so cheap. So I really think Acropolis is a must-take here, just because you're going to have so many resources floating, and if the event deck goes fast, then you're in it's actually really, really hard to spend down. Here, I actually picked up new deposits, so what I'm hoping for on this flip I'm going to see new deposits, like I said, and I'm hoping for a flip of a little bit of resources or a little bit of science so that I can go for these iron right away. It's also highly, highly beneficial for me to get new deposits in when I'm going to be the first one on iron. So I flip, don't want a settlement. Unfortunately, I don't get really what I want, so I build 2 stages of Stonehenge, increase population, and just develop out this iron. I don't think that I needed to build any steps of Stonehenge at all, and I just probably could have increased population to get out of corruption and then take Code of Laws, and I think that's a line of play that a lot of people would take. But lately, I've been kind of listening to Wadabon's videos where he doesn't really take Code of Laws, and I've started to agree with it more and more. I used to value this card extremely highly, but it does limit your transitions into H2 governments, and even though I have Stonehenge, I have 6 extra science, it's not so much that I can be so frivolous with my science here. I just believe in myself to be in some civil action debt, so I don't really want to be taking cards on 2. I want to get the cards out that matter, and I know that I'm going to be upgrading this iron. That being said, this is all completely a stylistic play, and I think that Code of Laws is also a perfectly reasonable pickup to go for. Fjantarik finishes Roman roads, takes Silk Road, so this would deny Totsilence. Reveals Phalanx and has enough science, plus enough resources and population to go for it next turn. So this can be pretty threatening. Martin seats, flips Development of Crafts, takes 2nd iron, builds 1 stage of Colossus, takes Patriotism, and then reveals Fighting Band. So even Martine, who is Sun Tzu, probably feels a little bit threatened for military resources, just because Fjantarik is threatening that 7 next turn. Totsilence flips development, seeds flips development trade routes, goes for Code of Laws, takes alchemy, builds a lab, increases pop, builds a temple. So you can already see that this is a very, very awkward way to spend down your resources. I think if you had Acropolis or something here, you didn't need to build this temple and could have just increased population, finished the wonder, finished the lab. I think would have been able to do everything with all the resources that he had. So whenever I make this kind of play of building this temple, especially so early, I always feel like I'm losing. Okay, and then going on to my turn. Since Totsilence didn't really respond to the strengthening potential that much, I do think that it's important for me to take these knights. Obviously, I don't need to develop it yet because everyone else is pretty weak and the event deck hasn't moved too far down. But I do end up seeding Crusades here. I mostly think that I won't be part of it too much, and I think I mostly just want a blank event in the next deck. So here I flip to Element of Politics, get a Phalanx myself so I can use fewer military actions later. Build a warrior with my Homer resources, increase production, take knights here, and I don't really have the civil actions to take Code of Laws, which, again, I still think is fine. I'm going to be spending down my science next turn on knights anyways, and then with only 2 science production, I'm not really expected to accumulate a lot over throughout age 1. So then I just reveal the Phalanx right away, so don't have to spend the military action later. Fjantarik increases population twice, uses built a lab, uses Boudica's extra resources to finish the Phalanx, and yep, 7 strength. It was pretty, I mean, he projected it and went for it. So Martine seeds, let's development planning, plays cartography, finishes Colossus, plays patriotism, builds an extra warrior, and takes Columbus here. So really hard on that colonization strategy, and I really like the prophylactic build of the warrior, just in case you need to send it for colonies and you don't want to lower your strength too much. Now Totsilence upgrades the lab twice, takes Joan, elects, brings strength up to 3, so could be more defensible here. So I can kind of see the reason of building the second temple, since it does synergize with Joan really well. But I still really don't like the idea of having 2 temples built in age 1. Here, everyone got stronger, so of course I need to as well. Build a knight, cover some of Homer's resources, finish Stonehenge, take Han, take rich land. So the reason I take Han first off is, 1, I don't see any wonders on the row, and I recently had a game against Raced in the Australian Open where I don't feel like he did anything wrong and he waited on Homer and didn't take a leader, and eventually Homer expired. The problem with this deck is that the other 2 leaders are Leonardo and Eleanor, and they're not really super beneficial leaders for me either. So I think just getting the leader, guaranteeing the fact that I don't lose Homer's happy face, is really nice here, or is just the safe play here. And as much as I like irrigation, I skipped out on that for taking Con or Richland. I just don't think irrigation is well supported here, since there's no statue, there's no ocean liner, so there's less reason to, or there's no Machu Picchu either, so there's less reason to want irrigation. I also finished Stonehenge as opposed to upgrading a mine here, just because I feel like I didn't want to spend that civil action taking one of these cards here. Fjantarik starts Silk Road, builds another knight, takes irrigation, takes drama, and just continues building on Silk Road. Martine seeds, flips Crusades, Fjantarik wins that over Totsilence, develops Iron, and starts building on it, takes Swordsman and Urban Growth. So the Sun Tzu tactic here is going to be an upgraded Fighting Band, which is okay and less game altering than some of its alternatives. Totsilence offers open borders to me. I feel like I'm probably the least threatening person here, but it really benefits me a lot since it brings me up to 3 military actions. Totsilence also takes this Great Wall here. It's an interesting first wonder to take because it's so susceptible to ravages of time. But I can kind of see this because Martine is not really going for the medieval army upgraded tactics. So having an upgraded fighting band with warriors plus Great Wall could keep your strength in check for a very long time. And then just starts building on the Great Wall, takes breakthrough, takes rich land. Builds a warrior, refills fighting band. So here you can see I upgraded the mine. Build another knights, just to increase my strength a bit. Also uses Homer's resource one last time. Switch to leader, grab Himeji here. I didn't really feel the need to grab any of these. Technologies or cards for one civil action, and I think Himeji is just a reasonable way to spend down my resources, especially since I have Iron. There is an argument to take breakthrough, but I just didn't want to spend 2 civil actions on something when I really haven't only been trying to play it from this part of the card row for a long time now. I had so much civil action debt with Homer, with Stonehenge, with grabbing Iron on 3 that I just felt like I don't really want to take yellow cards, that I just really don't want to grab anything for 2 civil actions anymore. Fjantarik takes Leonardo. Alex finishes Stonehenge, so getting a good amount of science production even though he has no alchemy. So definitely can still pay off in developing resources, just no science bonus right now. There are still 2 alchemies in the deck, one here, so you can upgrade that science production that way later. Martine Seeds, flips new deposits, bigger boost for me than the others. Upgrades, destroys a mine, which is a pretty interesting call here. Elects Columbus and takes breakthrough, and then takes irrigation as well. Yeah, I don't really know what destroying this mine does. It signals something. It signals strength events. It signals maybe the ability to bid extra for colonies. But it is a very, very interesting choice and not one that I think I'd be willing to make anytime soon. Totsilence Seeds, flips cultural influence, takes masonry, develops it, finishes Great Wall. Yeah, and he did use the engineering genius finally there, so was able to get that off with building some sort of wonder. One thing to note is that Totsilence, even though he has this Great Wall, even though he'll be on an upgraded fighting band eventually, I think he'll be destined to be pretty weak for a while. Because he's kind of population locked here, as soon as age 2 starts, he won't be able to increase population. So he won't really be able to get more than a 3rd unit out if he disbands very easily. So he's destined to be pretty weak until Riflemen come out or so. Here, I finish Himeji, finish upgrading my mines, and increase population. Just don't really feel the need to grab anything. There's an argument to take Bread and Circus here, but I don't really want an age 1 happiness solution, and I'm not getting any more population anytime soon, so I don't really feel like it's worthwhile to grab one of these age 1s when I could get Team Sports or Organized Religion later, preferably Team Sports. This also leaves Alchemy on 2, so it's a little bit harder for Fjantarik to get. And in fact, he doesn't even go for it. Increases population, builds the farm outright, and upgrades again. So I think that this is very questionable to skip this Bread and Circus here. Fjantarik is going to have a bit of an issue with happiness, so he's really relying on the second Bread and Circus here. And I can totally respect not taking one of these alchemies with the idea that one of them will be available for him next turn. Martine uses Columbus. Uses Columbus for vast territory. Increases population. And then builds 2 swordsmen. So pushing up to 17 strength with that upgraded fighting band. I mean, I'm sure he looks very scary to everyone here. I have Himeji, so I feel a little bit safer than the others, and that was a nice pickup to actually get. Uh, he does do this at the cost of not building a line here, which he could afford, so I think he's really pushing that strength, trying to dictate the pace of this game. And then takes theocracy as well. Won't have a good way of dealing with happiness other than, like, on his next population increase, this theocracy would take care of his happiness. And then draws 3 cards from Colossus. Totsilence grabs Iron, upgrades again, and is just very weak here. I haven't played with Totsilence this season, but these last couple of plays really reminded me that he plays in a very economical way, just trying to outgreed the others. It's definitely not very safe, it's definitely high risk, but it can also pay off in the end, just because you get your economy set up faster than others. Here, I go for Alchemy, upgrade twice, and since I just spent my whole turn doing that, I just don't have very much to do here. The reason I want to focus on my production here is I think it's just a good way to spend down my resources. I think maybe if I have 2 alchemies, or maybe a third one later with government, or maybe even getting Universitas, I could just get enough science production for the rest of H2, and even if I want to play a lower science strategy, 6 science would be perfectly reasonable for the rest of the game. I could think about Bread and Circus again and deny Fjantarik because it has issues, but if he's already going for that line, he's not going for the alchemy bonus. I just feel like I'm going to focus on my own civilization and not worry about others. Again, I don't really want Bread and Circus, so I'm not going to spend the actions doing so, and I really don't want to use any other civil actions that I can't really afford to do something like that. So I also do specifically take this alchemy as opposed to this one. In doing so, I technically slow down the deck coming down a little bit. I don't really know if it matters since the cards are essentially random that come out, but I was thinking that it would just be a little bit harder for my opponents, Martine and Totsilence, to take good Age 2 cards, because Age 1 cards might just be clogging up these rows. Fjantarik goes for the Bread and Circus line here. He can get out of his happiness issues by going for it with only those 4 civil actions. There was the possibility of dealing with this happiness issue by just disbanding something and then going for the alchemy plus 1 upgrade, but this gives a little bit extra strength as well, so maybe Red Circus a little bit better. The big issue here is that Fjantarik only has 2 military actions now, and if Martine got a good aggression off here, Fjantarik is relying on 2 H2 draws with only 2 military actions, so it's pretty much guaranteed. Also, not going for the alchemy leaves you less susceptible to things like raids, and maybe doesn't value the science production as much just because he already has so much from Silk Road and Roman Roads. So Martine is able to get a spy off, almost 100% guaranteed. Goes for Kremlin, takes Kremlin, starts building on it, and upgrades Warrior here. So Colossus paying off, the extra strength paying off. Still a little bit awkward with this, only 3 mines, but should be fine for the meantime. Totsilence goes into Monarchy, upgrades his mine 1 more time, takes selective breeding on 3 and Richland on 1. So that little thing that I did with alchemy did make Totsilence pay 1 extra civil action, which I thought was kind of like a cute play. It's not really necessary play. Here I go for Universitas. Takes Swordsman because I got the tactic, because I got the classic army tactic. I do want to say that the Universitas is pretty questionable, but like I said, I somewhat value the 6 science. It's hard to spend down my resources. I don't really want to go for something like scientific method. I could have grabbed team sports, which is my other alternative. So I think it would have been very reasonable for me instead to go for Universitas with a small science boost, just to take a good Age 2 card here, and then maybe like take team sports, take swordsman, then probably just play the swordsman out, knowing that I can go for the classic army next turn. And then here I actually draw a war over. Well, that went went by so fast. I actually draw a war over territory. So now I could really set up a nice strong war with a with my classic army here. Fjantarik here goes for cannons on 2 civil actions. Increases pop, goes for a cannon. Just needs to increase that strength. Doesn't want to be so susceptible to an aggression again. And at least being at 13 might make Martine question that a bit. Martine cedes. Flips strategic territory. Wins it. I don't think either of us really bothered with this colonization power. I just didn't want to spend units. I didn't want to have to rebuild them. I don't have the extra food, so it didn't really matter too much to me. Like, I can't even bid more than 4 anyways, so yeah. Anyways, Martine wins that, goes increase population, goes for cook here, and then takes scientific method. Just, yep, I think that's pretty reasonable. And really going with that colonization play, or he really has a plan for colonization this whole game. It's been very consistent. Totsilence takes Maria, takes organized religion, takes urban growth, and then goes for selective breeding here. I think there is some argument to elect Maria, since it will give you extra resources. But it does come at a cost of losing 2 strength from Joan, losing a military action. So maybe that that Totsilence feels that he needs to keep the strength to stay safe here. But for me, I get a little bit fortunate with the card row. And something I didn't really think about too much, because I just thought it was too powerful, was that I run this war over territory with Totsilence here. I'm able to get this war out because of all the extra military actions that constitutional monarchy provides. And my strength is actually pretty high with classic army and the possibility of sacking as well. I also have an open borders agreement with Totsilence as well, which gives me 2 extra strength on offense. But I would expect him to cancel that coming into this war. I don't really think there's much other alternative play, to be honest. Fjantarik has technically the possibility of getting mobile artillery here. While I don't think it's likely, based on how few draws he has, I think that Totsilence is completely undefensible, even with getting riflemen here. Basically, Totsilence has stayed too weak for too long, didn't grab any military techs, used all of his science on production buildings, and just is very exposed here. So there's pretty much no way that Totsilence can defend, even though he has Great Wall, even though he has Joan plus Organized Religion. So this war ends up being completely safe. I also mean that there's no alternative line, just because I think I'm going to grab Constitutional Monarchy no matter what here. So it limits the amount of civil actions that I have left. I can't really finish. Really finish Universitas. I can grab selective breeding anyways. So, but I will say that one small thing is that me grabbing that alchemy that I talked about did possibly move my constitutional monarchy 1 step too far to maybe grab an extra revolutionary idea or architecture. Fjantarik goes for Nobel, grabs coal, grabs revolutionary idea, and just upgrades the farm. Takes corruption, which is pretty tough on only 3 resource production. Martine seats, flips foray, glad to be part of that. Goes to scientific method, grabs architecture, and then upgrade or finishes Kremlin and then upgrades a lab once. So Martine's production a little bit behind, but getting up there at this point. Totsilence elects Maria. He needs this he needs Maria for the extra science from the population boost in order to go for riflemen. Grabs wave, upgrades warrior as well, and then grabs breakthrough. There honestly wasn't much of an alternative defense here. Could maybe go for organized religion with the Joan strength, but it really wouldn't be much better. The big thing that Totsilence missed is that I think he really needed to cancel open borders here, because me being at effective 21 strength, all I need to do is sack 1 warrior in order to get an extra yellow token. So here I finished the war sacking a warrior, winning by 3. Or sorry, able to grab 3 yellow tokens. And since this does so much damage to Totsilence, I start focusing a little bit elsewhere. In terms of aggressions, well, since it's all in terms of my political action, all I have are aggressions. I have the opportunity to either go for Fjantarik or Totsilence. The thing about Fjantarik is that he's only drawn like 2 or 3 military cards at this point, so I think it's really hard for him to defend if I sack another unit, and then I can always use the foray to rebuild the unit. This is my thought at the time, and I really, really, really disagree with it. I don't really need to be so loose with this, but I just felt like if I was able to get some aggression through on Fjantarik, I already did a devastating war with territory on Totsilence, that there's pretty much no way I can't have a good position at the end of all of this. But sacrificing a unit is always expensive, even though I think it doesn't really cost that much. It does end up being very expensive. It's always very expensive. And I just really, really hate the idea that I went for Fjantarik here with an aggression, sacking, and trying to get an aggression through. I was so focused on the fact that this spy would help me have a much, much better turn that I decided to risk it. And yeah, and I just hate the outcome that happened here. So I didn't really care if he defended too much. I thought it was a possibility. I think it was something like, I don't know, 40 or 50% possibility of defending. But like I said, I can rebuild the unit, finish Universitas, go for Napoleon, grab architecture here. I want to focus on the fact that because I destroyed a unit here, I've lost a population here, and this can take me a really long time to recover since I don't have extra food. Just taking the food and not having the extra resources to build up, maybe I could have taken this frugality as well, which gives me another additional population on top of all of that. I just want, to recognize the fact that I could have had a lot more production going more easily over the next coming turns, and this kind of population sack, while it didn't seem costly at the time, can really snowball into a much greater loss. Anyways, Fjantarik goes for this Republic, does a government swap, takes Rifleman, builds an arena, and then copies Classic Army. So no cannon tactic in here, and just setting up for these Riflemen to come out. Martin seats, flips Call to Arms, goes for the late Theocracy, upgrades the lab, but this does give him the opportunity to get stronger. And something about this deck is that this deck is 5 out of 6 of these events are Martin. The only other person who's seated is Totsilence. I had to double check. It is currently round 12, and the last time somebody else seated besides Martin was back in round 7, so age 1. Yeah, I needed to double check that the graphics weren't bugged or anything like usual, but since Martin is going for strength and knows almost all of the events, I assume that there is some strength in the deck. Anyways, Martin finished his turn by taking reserves. Totsilence goes through Organized Religion. Kind of has to now that he lost so many yellow tokens. But Maria giving extra resources, having his food production already set, Totsilence might be in a really bad position, but it's not completely unrecoverable here. Here, I did set up the second aggression after the first one. There's pretty much no way that, there's pretty much no way that Fjantarik should be able to defend. And here I destroy 2 arenas here, and I do this for basically just maximum damage against Fjantarik civilization. Fjantarik is basically forced to go for Rifleman next turn, so he's not going to have the resources to rebuild this happiness issue. So if he wants to do that, he'll have to disband something else in addition to that. So even though this only destroys 2 Bread and Circus, it's a pretty big deal to have to also disband something else if you want to actually defend. So here I go for Selective Breeding, upgrade, go for Justice System, go for Rich Land. So here, I do go for this Rich Land. I do plan on building another mine here or something, get my production up right away. And here you can see that I have a really good set of upgrades already. I'm at fully upgraded food, mine, and 6+6 science as well. But if I did have an extra population with that foray, with that extra resources, with that extra food a little bit, not having to build an extra warrior, I could have, instead of this rich land, increased population and built a mine here. So instead of this like 666, I could be at 686, and I think that would just be such a amazing and crushing position for me here. If I had all those upgrades plus such a healthy yellow bank, um, I think it would be really, really difficult for me to lose. I would probably be in a game-winning position 90% of the time or more. So here, Fjantarik, he does go for these riflemen, which means that he's choosing to disband something and disbands a lab here. So this is essentially a 9 resource setback on somebody who only has 3 resource production. And then takes the efficient upgrade and urban growth. So this coal is super, super delayed, having to deal with all these problems as well. Martine seats, and then flips barbarians, which I was actually very surprised that I was in the most culture lead. I didn't think I had a big culture civilization, but it just turns out now I'm going to lose another population, which I think I would have lost anyways, but this was a really big shock. And um, having sacked 2 population, having lost the 3rd, I'm really feeling the pain here. Martine grabs cannons, upgrades the farm, and takes breakthrough here. Totsilence seats, flips on certain borders, so 2 strength events coming from Martine here. Can see why he specifically wanted to be the strongest as well. Anyways, Totsilence increases population, increases again, grabs cavalrymen, grabs patriotism, and develops the cannons. So if he's developing the cannons here and going for 2 cannons, you can pretty much tell he's going for a defensive army and has it in hand, as opposed to these cavalrymen, which classic army is already revealed. Here, I had a debate. Well, first I increased my population so I can rebuild the swordsman, but the rest of my term, I debated on whether going for the strategy and developing it so I would be the strongest, or I could just go for like justice system and then build that mine that I sort of wanted to build. And because I talked about how Martine has pretty much every event here, including the H2 ones, I kind of play conservatively and I go for the strategy and the strength here. I wish that I didn't. I wish that I went for the justice system. The thing is that Fjantarik is pretty unlikely to seed. I guess Totsilence could seed, but I think that I should have just focused on my economy more. But the fact is, like, I set myself back more than I wanted to by doing all these things. I don't disagree with the fact of taking strategy here. I think that Fjantarik is really, really punished for being on Republic for the rest of age 3 until he gets military 3, and it just puts him in a tight spot. And yeah, just go for the strategy to play it safe, but I wish I was just more economically greedy like Totsilence was sometimes. Fjantarik goes for the coal, builds an arena with urban growth, and then goes for efficient upgrade and frugality. And then cavalryman, just for the possibility of H3 tactics. So Fjantarik is finally catching up in terms of production. Martine seeds, flip scientific breakthrough, grabs Suez, pretty late Suez for him, so, but it'll still be good to increase production that way. Totsilence grabs and finishes Harvard right away, upgrades Temple again, and that's pretty much it. So those were all effectively our last H2 turns. So I want to go into our overview. Pretty much everyone's going to start picking up the rest of their production bottlenecks. The Totsilence and I pretty much have the fully upgraded lab mine farm that we want. Fjantarik also has upgraded food completely. It's probably going to try and upgrade his mines a little bit more with efficient upgrades. And Martine is a little bit behind in the food production, but has extra yellow tokens from Vast and possibly more from the Suez as well. So even though his resource and food production is a little bit behind, it might come in a different form than the others. That being said, I do think that Martine and I are definitely in the best positions overall. I think that Fjantarik has some struggle with the military actions. Totsilence has some struggle with his yellow bank. So even though that the production is there for everybody, I think that the damage that I put out was pretty significant in delaying people's economies. Um, yeah, so, and also Fjantarik does really have this science bottleneck, and the fact that he relies on Nobel so heavily can really come back to bite him. So here I still build that, I go for the social system, build that mine that I wanted to, increase population, and the card that I think that is, the card that I mentioned that I think is the tech to take computers is on the row, so I go for that. Yep. There's Meyer as well already here, so there's a possibility I can transition to Meyer right away after upgrading these computers. I also have enough science to go for architecture and computers, making them a little bit cheaper as well. I will say though, I did have the opportunity to start culture production right away with Opera and maybe try and pull away the game that way. But I do think that this popularization of science, the fact that Meyer's here, does influence my decision a lot to go for computers. Fjantarik upgrades a mind, increases population, takes a revolutionary idea, science is a big bottleneck, takes Opera, and then builds a arena here. Opera is a good speculative pick that I also did because Chaplin and Marlena are possible leaders. Martine seeds, flips politics of strength. I win that, so I have quite a few cards, but almost all of them are defense cards. Anyways, Martine plays reserves, grabs Engineering Genius, grabs Meyer, finishes Suez here. Revealing the, I forgot which territory it was, Historic 2. So somewhat dealing with the happiness issues that he could have, but also not really the greatest economical colony to have in hand. Grabbing Meyer here could be a signal that he expects iconoclasm soon. Just because I don't think Meyer is necessarily a good leader with the with only scientific method. Bringing your science down from 4 to 6 is a big cost already in H3. But you can see that he doesn't elect just yet, just because Cook is already a bigger culture benefit. So I will say that because Martine seeded flip policy strength here, that extra strength from strategy did end up paying off, but I didn't necessarily need to do it on the turn that I did. I did get, like, I would have in the turn order gotten lucky to do so, but I've also could have gotten unlucky and been denied H3 draws. So again, the strategy didn't really pay off, but it also kind of did, or it would have paid off about 1/3 of the time. And I feel like I could have been more greedy here, and I still kind of wish that I was, just because that my economy would just be set up just a little bit faster. Totsilence grabs these oil, grabs efficient upgrade, has Harvard, so he's able to do it right away. Doesn't use their Maria bonuses, grab the second efficient upgrade as well. One of the things that Totsilence has to do is that since he has not a lot of population left, he does have to increase his, if he wants to increase economy, it all has to be vertical at this point. So here, I'm left. Also, it does reveal the defensive army, just to get a little stronger again than everybody else. So here, I'm in somewhat of another crossroads. I could go for the Chaplin, Opera, plus architecture line. I could even build 2 of them right away. I also have these rockets here with Napoleonic army if I want to be strength threatening. But the thing is I got that political strength, but no war off, or no war in hand. And I do have this popularization of science, impact of science. There's also Manhattan Project here, which could help keep me a little bit safer in strength races, or the fact that if I actually have computers developed, that Manhattan is a good amount of points as well. So all of these science-leaning things lead me to think that I'm going to go for the computers here, and that's what I end up doing. I seed it, but this iconoclasm hits here. So again, I go through the same debate once again on what I'm going to do. Maybe I want a leader right away, especially if there's 2 on the row. I have the Opera in hand. It's not too expensive to go for. But then I remembered that I actually seeded Impact of Science here, so I need to play for Impact of Science. I also have the popularization in hand, and I'm hoping that if I seed popularization later, that it's worth even more points, because it might not be flipped prematurely. So go for the architecture, go for computers, and just grab Manhattan here. That means I skip it on the rockets, I skip it on Chaplin. These all could have been good for me, but there's still, 3 other lab leaders that I could grab in the next coming turns. It is, like it is a big cost to lose out on these rockets, but everybody else has cannons, so I don't think people will be too focused on that. One other thing, though, that I need to do based on my discards, I do have to discard a lot, of course, is that I should have kept this impact of agriculture. My plan is to get impact popularization of science into the next deck, so I really need the seeds to keep going, and I need something in hand to keep seeding every turn. It is very, very risky to do this with popularization, not knowing that it can actually come out or not. So I need to make sure that my plan lines up with, I need to make sure that my political actions line up with my plan. And then I do regret not getting these rockets just because this War of Culture comes in hand on my draw. Anyways, Fjantarik grabs Marlena, goes for Opera, grabs Military Theory, and develops it. So finally got out of that issue here, but now science is down to 2, so there's definitely going to be some issues with the overall impacts in this game. It is also a little bit questionable to go for Marlena over Chaplain here, just because that the culture boost is a little bit better from Chaplain. I do understand that Marlena does help prevent having to build an extra building, but I do think the extra culture that Chaplain provides over Marlena might be worth it. Anyways, Martin goes for cannons. Now that he sees the defensive army that Totsilence has available, can definitely get stronger that way without having to build extra military attacks, and really uses the swordsman well. Then Martin grabs fundamentalism here, and I'm actually really unsure as to why he does this. I mean, I do know that switching from theocracy to communism is a happy face loss, so it's not necessary for him to actually. So I can see that there's that happiness issue. But other than that, like going down to 4 science, and then if you switch down to Meyer, it would go down to 2. Feels like a big cost to your civilization here. Yeah. I'm sure Martin did consider this communism, consider the fact that he gets out of corruption building a cannon. Maybe the extra strength is also useful because he's not grabbing Air Force. But I just feel like that fundamentalism so early, it just can really affect your civilization in a bad way. Anyways, Totsilence seeds, hopes freedom of movement. Also continues on upgrading vertically, grabs Chaplain eventually for movies later, but right now uses those efficient upgrades for computers just for the ability to, I guess, increase impact. Chaplain plus movies is nice because you only really need the one unit in the urban building for that huge economic boost. Here I see popularization of science, flip national pride. Martin wins that. I finished Manhattan, and I don't necessarily need to because I can defend aggressions, but my game plan is to get people to cede. And if I am in a position where my strength is so much lower, I don't want them to have any inclination to aggress at all. This could be a little bit wrong though, just because I could wait for bigger computer upgrades, get a bigger Manhattan. I don't necessarily need it to defend, so I can play more greedily. And I could spend my resources doing something like developing operas, building up computers, stuff like that. So the other cards I grab, reserves, patriotism, Air Force, and with my last action, I increase population here. So I think that I'm being pretty civil action inefficient here. I don't think that I should grab these reserves for 2 civil actions. I have talked about this a lot in my recent videos, which is I think I am bleeding civil actions in Age 3. I think that I have too many cards in hand that I need to actually play, and I actually don't have that many civil actions. Especially if I want to grab something like Spaceflight. I have 4 wonders already, so the minimum cost of Spaceflight is 5 of these 7 actions. I need to actually develop these cards. So this reserves is a little bit too civil action intensive for me. I think that my turn should have been, with this extra remaining 2, is to increase population again and play Opera. I held back on developing technologies just because Steve Jobs is possible. But the thing is that Jobs competes a little bit against, well, Jobs and Spaceflight do work together, but in terms of how civil action efficient they are both very, very tough on me. So if I'm going to try and balance jobs and spaceflight together, I need to just get the opera out, maybe build one next turn, and just try to ignore civil action inefficient cards like reserves on 2. And then unfortunately, I don't get an impact here. So this really, really makes me regret not holding on to that impact of agriculture. I do have something to do with my political action next turn with international tourism. But that's not really the way that I want to advance the deck. Anyways, Fjantarik builds a rifleman, goes for cavalry, and then you can see that he has modern army here. Goes for Red Cross, builds 3 steps. So getting a decent point boost here. And a decent strength boost from that modern army. Doesn't really have enough science to threaten the Air Force or anything, so I don't think there's any real war threat, but at least defensively for now, at least Totsilence should have to respond to this in some way. Martine Seeds, flips Independence Declaration, builds a step on the Red Cross, goes for Meyer for a little extra culture, grabs Revolutionary Idea, Civil Service, Military Buildup, and Endowment. And then it adopts that defensive army. So that was all pretty natural. The one thing is that Martine doesn't really have much more population left to go for. He has no food production. So where his civilization is, it's not going to change too much from here. Totsilence Seeds, flips immigration. So this is the fourth population that I've lost to some sort of event or sacking, and it's really starting to build up a lot. Obviously, my alternative play didn't really play around it, but it does make me a little bit more inefficient with my next turn. So, Totsilence goes for Chaplain, builds a theater, goes for Air Force, and leaves himself 20 strength behind somebody who has 46, while only having 3 military actions. So this feels like a classic Totsilence line to me. I don't know. He could have finished this defensive army. Didn't necessarily need to go for the theater right away. Maybe he thinks he needs to play completely greedy. But the thing is that his civilization is a lot better in impacts than somebody like Fjantarik. So if he doesn't actually expose himself this turn, there's a good chance that this civilization is strong enough to come away with more impact victories. Okay. So I have this international tourism in hand for my political action, and I really want to offer to Totsilence. But the problem is that Totsilence only has 2 wonders, whereas Martine and Fjantarik effectively have 3 each done. I see myself in a position where, Martine has the most culture, still a good amount of culture production, a good amount of resources to build a wonder if he needs to. I see him as the most threatening in terms of points. So I end up offering to Fjantarik here. And I think that this is a mistake. Even though I'm getting the 3 culture from Fjantarik, I still think that I'm probably supposed to offer this to Totsilence. This is because the play that I do this turn can really boost Fjantarik's potential wonders or potential points, which is I'm not taking this fast food chains. My issue with taking fast food chains, so my turn taking fast food chains would be to take Bill Gates, take fast food chains, and then that would essentially be it. I could either choose to elect Gates or build on this Red Cross stage that I just did, and I think that I would elect Gates regardless. So already building that stage is a 12-point swing against Fjantarik since he can actually build the last stage. So I want my 6 points that way, and I decide to go for Gates while building up my civilization. The other problem that I have with taking fast food chains is that there is not a lot for Fjantarik to take, and he has a lot of civil actions and not a lot of cards in hand and not a lot to develop. So I'm afraid that if I don't pass the fast food chains to Fjantarik, the age will end too soon, or the game will end too soon, without enough ways to seed into the deck to get out this popularization of science, or to get enough of my own production really paying off. I didn't really get to see a lot of impacts in this game, so what I really need are just impacts to go into the deck for me to win the game, and I really don't want this game to be slowed. I don't really want this game to be ending fast. So I just finished, or I just kind of build up my civilization more and just do some relatively action intense things. I am also technically set up for like a little bit of a sneaky war at 62 strength with this Napoleonic army. So if people aren't careful, they could really fall into that little trap. Okay, so Fjantarik, he does spend most of his action. Well, first off, he gets the guaranteed aggression on Totsilence. Grabs fast food chains. So this really boosts Fjantarik's economy a lot. Just having this extra, what was it, like 9 resources, really, really, really helps Fjantarik improve his civilization and finish his wonder over the next coming turns. Martine also lands an aggression, but this is just armed intervention. Plays a revolutionary idea, goes for mechanized agriculture, and builds an extra lab this way as well. So increasing science a little bit, increasing culture a little bit, it just helps them keep a little bit more balance as well. This harmony, though, is very terrible. So there are some impacts that Martine, even though he has a culturally, look really bad on. Then plays the reserves out of hand because the age might end before his turn comes again. Totsilence seeds, plus impact of science. So at least this is still very good for Totsilence here. Just built that theater last turn, lost it already. Builds an air force, develops air force, builds an air force, takes satellites, develops satellites. So defensible now, a little bit late, I think, eating those aggressions, then goes for positional army to be the strongest here. So I do get my wish of possibly getting that spaceflight, like I said, but spaceflight is 7 civil actions, and I only have 7 civil actions. Again, I am safe with all these defense cards if I choose to be. So I could, in theory, take spaceflight here. But again, in the same line, I posture myself as weak. I am more than 1 defense card away from several people. So if multiple people, if Fjantarik and Totsilence both aggress me, I don't think I can defend that. If all 3 decide to, just to affect my civilization, I definitely get into a lot of trouble. And just having any aggression at all doesn't make the event deck move down, which is something that I really need. I only have 1 guaranteed seed here from Impact of Variety, so I need a little bit of help from my opponents here to get that popularization of science out. So I play very conservatively here, see the Impact of Variety, trying to move the deck along. I don't take the spaceflight, of course, and then I increase my strength by building an air force. So Impact of Architecture flips. I believe this was mine from earlier, but I didn't talk about it. Take democracy, build an air force, build an opera here. So one of the nice things about this turn is that opera and democracy is going to be at least 12 culture overall over the next 2 turns. And then if something like impact of competition is in, and I plan on building these pro sports, it could help for happiness and competition as well. So I'm just trying to shore up my points in terms of impacts, because I know that as long as popularization of science flips, I've pretty much won this game. I have enough cultural production, I have good enough across the board in other things that I think I should be able to win on the end screen. Something I did not talk about, though, and I needed to mention, is that I did have the rockets plus Napoleonic war available for 62 or 67 strength, assuming that I sack. And I need to talk about the defense for my opponents. Fjantarik is the most obvious person who I can attack. He can only build 3 units. First off, he has to upgrade this cavalryman, so it has 14 resources available for double Napoleonic here. Or sorry, no, double modern here. This one upgrade pushes up an extra 7 strength, so that's 53. But since he only has 14 resources, he doesn't have enough for the requisite next army. That 53 strength is pretty limited to 61 at most by building, or not even 61, maybe. I'm not even sure. Some outdated army combination, I guess. I think that outdated army combination of cannon, cavalry, warrior, maybe makes Fjantarik's total strength like 63 or so. It would require a lot of disbanding, of course, since there's not a lot of free population. So what I'm afraid of is that if I go forward against Fjantarik, Since he doesn't really have a lead against anybody, he might just resign. And I don't take clear enough cards to make it an unresignable war. The second option here is, well, I'll just talk about this non-option here of Totsilence, completely unwarrable, has enough to build another positional army, and that brings his strength way higher than 67. Martin, on the other hand, is an interesting choice. Not a lot of science here, can't go for military theory, can't go for air force. But he has 9 plus 4 resources in hand, so at least 27 resources available. And with enough disbands, I believe Martin's strength is something around 70, 71 or 72. Hard to do exact math. It depends on if he wants to possibly build. It depends on what combination he wants to build, but let's just say it's the low 70s. And obviously that beats my 67, but it requires disbanding everything. It really just requires disbanding everything. And that would also mean that Martin would lose. But the thing is that Martin might lose anyways if he doesn't do that. So I wouldn't really be hurting somebody, and it could cause me to lose as well, or at least not finish first. Because if I take a negative hit against Martin Fischer, there's a good chance that I could lose to Fjantarik or Totsilence even getting spaceflight. So if I go for that war against Martin, I might even take like third in that line. So that's why I leaned so much on that popularization idea. I think it's really the only way that I can take first. Knowing that Martin is going to be the one getting spaceflight here, I just need to catch up in points with the event deck. The problem with the event deck line and not going for the spaceflight earlier, though, I think spaceflight would be the most solid choice because since I don't have events myself to seed, this is a very, very, very high variance that I might not be able to win with this popularization coming out. Anyways, it's just something that I have to deal with this game. Yeah. Anyways, Fjantarik takes engineering, takes reserves, has enough extra spare resources to build an extra opera here, and then just upgrades to push his strength up a bit. Martin is going to grab spaceflight. Base up military alliance, increase population, build some religions, take spaceflight. This spaceflight will be about 21 for Martin, and Fjantarik, I believe, will be 25 for the fast food chains. Totsilence doesn't really have much to do, no wonder or anything to start. Seeds, so pretty happy this came out. Impact of Wonders, likely seeded by Martin earlier. Grabs Democracy, goes for it, disbands a Rifleman, and then goes for a movies here. Increases a mine, so very likely signaling Impact of Industry. Passes the turn. So I want to talk about my possible lines of victory and what made me decide that I wanted to just aggress Martin for a 3 strength difference, knowing that he can defend here. So first off, I really, really hate that I discarded Impact of Agriculture because popularization is the top card. Would give me a 10 or 12 point boost over my 2 main opponents here. I was thinking that with the potential points that they have based on production and wonder, and the fact that in this deck, Martin has 1 seed, I have 1 seed, the 1 seed being Impact of Variety that I know about, and Totsilence having 3, I'm thinking that Martin has a higher point total overall. So I decided to try to clear some cards from Martin, hoping that Totsilence or Fjantarik can aggress and maybe lower some of those points. The problem is that this line of thinking is suboptimal, because if Fjantarik makes some relevant successful aggression, his point total becomes a little bit higher as well, and doesn't really have any impacts in here to support whatever comes out of this besides the production plus wonder. So I need to take into account that Totsilence has 3 seeds, which ones are actually possible, which ones help my civilization over Fjantarik's, and there's actually quite a few of them that I could play for, or that I'm already better in, and I don't need to worry about. Especially because Fjantarik's civilization has basically no science. I don't really need to worry things about that things that are likely possible already help me, like the impact of industry that I mentioned is slightly better for me. There's possibilities of like impact of technology or progress or things like that. Progress would be better for Martine. So I played off of intuition here, and I shouldn't have played off of intuition. I actually should have done the PV4 math, getting the tables up and whatnot, and really seeing what impacts are available for my opponents to actually seed and what their total max culture could be. Because I already have a 10-ish and 20-ish lead on top of the bonus that I get from Bill Gates, I actually have a little bit of breathing room here. I should know that Martine, his only available way of beating me is with some very specific combination of impacts, which need to be in the deck that he needs to seed because other people wouldn't seed for him. So him having only one impact in here means that there isn't enough combinations possible without popularization actually coming out. And if popularization comes out, then I win the game 100% of the time, every time. So I shouldn't be worrying about Martine at all. I should be worrying about Fjantarik because his possible impacts, while lower at the moment, his possible points are actually lower at the moment than Martine's. If he gets an aggression through, then his point total becomes just high enough that it actually matters. So me putting that aggression 2 to Martine actually opens up a door for me to lose, and we'll see it at the end of the impact evaluation screen. So at the time, I was thinking that Martine's actual point total potential was higher and Fjantarik's was lower, so I was like, okay, I'll try to do something about Martine, but I didn't really count on Fjantarik well enough. So I go for the pro sports, play the reserves, increase population, build a couple labs, and the reason I don't play for something like Impact of Strength is because I tried to incentivize Fjantarik to try to seed Impact of Strength. And if Impact of Strength is seeded at this turn, then I get a bigger popularization. Plus the Bill Gates bonus would make up for something like Impact of Strength anyways. This is probably an incorrect line of thinking because Totsilence could also seed Impact of Strength. He could also seed Impact of Culture. And those two are actually pretty big losses for me against Fjantarik. Totsilence, while he's lower now, could go up to 22 here, while Fjantarik is priced into building this faster chains. Ultimately, these decisions of not playing around my impacts well enough give me a window to lose, but we'll see what happens. So Fjantarik, because I took some cards out, actually gets an aggression through to Martine. Goes for the engineering, finishes fast food chains for 25, and then just takes a few cards off the row. Martine seats, floats popularization of science. So I am completely bailed out on Martine just because he seated here. Plays endowment, plays military buildup, finishes spaceflight for 22, actually, builds a temple and builds a mine. Disbands the swordsman just to get better impact competition. And then Totsilence doesn't seed here. So I really, really did get bailed out by Martine. I also kind of threw it by not keeping impact of agriculture. And then Totsilence rebalances a bit. Yeah, and increases culture a little bit this way. So before the impacts, you can see that I have a very slight lead. I do have 12 points in the bank because of Bill Gates. But I really feel like I'm saved by that polarization. Otherwise, Fjantarik and Martine are very close, but Totsilence has 3 impacts out of the remaining 6. 3 from Totsilence, 2 from Martine, and 1 from myself. So, going on the screen, Impact Happiness is one of these Totsilence seeds. So he catches up a bit to Martine here. Everybody else stays equal. Impact of Progress, one of Martin's seeds. Catches up to Fjantarik quite a bit. Impact of Colonies, another Martin seed. Passes Fjantarik. Impact of Industry, one of Totsilence seeds, so that was a little better for me than the others. But Totsilence makes a big push here. Impact Variety, my seed. Should be a little better for me than, equal for Fjantarik, but a little better than Martin. A little better for Totsilence as well. And one impact to go is Impact of Strength. So Totsilence is probably last seed or second to last seed, something like that. So you can see here that after my Bill Gates bonus, that I am only 14 points ahead of Fjantarik here, which means that I did open that door for me to lose. I am completely saved by the fact that Martin seeded two impacts here, and it didn't need to go down that way. I could have not incited that aggression, and then Martin would be slightly higher than Fjantarik, of course, but so basically I'm saying that if the aggression didn't go through, and whether or not Martin seeds or not, I would be ahead of both Fjantarik and Martin here. But because the gap is too small here, it's smaller than the 20, it means that I did leave a window for me to lose, and I didn't need to if I actually had done the real calculations on it. I did some essentially back of the napkin math based on how many points that they would get and the potential points that they would get, and I was trying to extend that, but I did not maximize my actual winning chances by doing this sort of 11th hour play that could have cost me the game. And overall, I'm generally pretty upset with how I played the end of the game. Especially, I'm upset with quite a few decisions that I made after I did the war over territory against Totsilence. Like I said earlier, I do feel like I was in a position to win this game very, very often. And because my economy was so well set up, because all the pieces were already in place, I just needed to make sure that I played tight and not actually focus on damaging other people, but just build up my own economy more. What this game comes down to is not maximizing my points, but maximizing my winning percentage. And I think I did a really terrible job of maximizing my winning percentage this game. Regardless, despite how hard I tried, my position was too good starting the end of H2 to really let go of the gas, and I have just enough points just to barely squeak this one out. Anyways, this allows us to look at the game standings so far, or the group standings so far. Since my recording from the last game, there's one other game that finished where Martin won and Totsilence actually lost. But otherwise, Martin has taken third in every other game that we've played together. This makes the standings where I am on top with 16. I could potentially be tied with Sectat if he does well in one of his next games. Martin here has taken third in every game where I had a video with him, but took first in the game that I did not play with him. And the other really notable thing here is while these three opponents don't have any games played, I guess Fjantarik has played 3 games with only 5 points, but Totsilence actually has played 3 games with 0 points, so he's really looking to be dangerously close to relegation. There's still a lot of points to be had for Tortured and Lambda, but I think that Martin has to basically win every game from here on out if he wants a chance at promotion. Anyways, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.